Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to the Attrition Sim Race Campus presented by SM Racing Products Oval Series. Here tonight for the second time ever in league history at the Michigan International Raceway. And it's going to be second time in a row at that. Of course, the last time we were here was last season, also in the ARCA car. And that race was won by none other than Brandon Feeney. Fun fact about this track, though, sister track of the Texas World Speedway, which unfortunately does not exist anymore and has not existed for probably a good 20 years now, I want to say, if not a little bit longer. But it's great to see that Michigan is still out here. 18 degrees of banking around these corners. Not quite a proper super speedway. Not quite as big as Daytona, not quite as big as Pocono, not quite as big as Talladega, but still definitely out there, 2 miles in length or 3.2 kilometers. And tonight is going to be one of the full-length ARCA events here this evening, so 200 miles will be the distance here for round number 7 here in season number 13. Drivers are making their way down to the starting grid here. 101 degree track temperature right now, and it's only bound to be getting hotter later in the day. So we're just going to have to see how these drivers are going to be able to manage their tires here tonight. Starting out on the pole here this evening in the 00 Everfrost entry, that's going to be none other than our current championship leader by about 50 points. That's going to be the 00 of Garrett Hess. Starting his outside in the number 38, second time that we have seen Feeney come out here this season. Currently running back in the 15th position in the championship standings. And right now, Mr. Brandon Feeney has started up on the front row after his absence. And, he, of course, like I said before, he is the driver who won this race last season. Starting back in position number three, though, that's going to be the 93 of Jason Gardner, league administrator in that all white with the orange ASRC paint scheme. Starting his outside in the number 44, that's going to be Mike Young in the Mountain Dew Code Red entry. Fifth place can go back to one of our other Canadian drivers. That's going to be the 42 of Michael Sparks in the NVIDIA entry, followed by that unsponsored 78 of Derek Murphy. Breaking the curse here tonight. He's not starting in 7th because that is going to be going back to the CZ Robotics 24 of Corey Logan. 8th place can go back to the SM Racing Products number 15 machine, last season's champion in that number 15, starting it off position at number 8, followed by another driver who we've only seen one appearance of here this season, finally being able to make a return. That's going to be the Dirty Mo Radio number 14 of Nico Morelli, rolling it off back in 9th. Finally, rounding out this 10-car field, that's going to be another one of the Canadian drivers, one of the Mooselanders out here in that number 4 Five Guys entry. That's going to be none other than Daniel Sparks, rolling it off in position number 10. 100 laps is the distance here tonight. This is bound to be one heck of a race, perhaps a little bit of a longer one here for the ASRC Oval Series, but we'll just have to see how these drivers manage to pull things off here. iRacing.com pace car has pulled off the speedway, and we are going to be waiting for a long green flag here. Green flag up in the air, side by side all throughout the field across the start-finish line. It looks like that initial start is good here. Maybe a little bit of sleeping on the inside line there. Jason Gardner falling back early in the goings down to turn number 1 in that number 93 machine. He's going to lose some positions here, falling back to the 4th spot behind that 44 of Mike Young, who's made the outside line work here, just behind Michael Sparks in the number 42 NVIDIA entry, following right behind Jason Gardner, trying to get some drafting going early on in this one's. While it's not quite a full-size super speedway in length, it very much is in its racing style. Drafting going to be a very big factor here. And of course, the big question on everyone's mind here, with this being a 200-mile event, which is a little bit uncharacteristic for the ASRC Oval Series, is how are the pit cycles going to work out here tonight? Some people think they can do it in one stop, maybe, possibly, if the cards fall in their favor correctly. Other people probably going to be leaning towards a 2-stopper here this evening, so we'll just have to see how the cards fall, especially with the potential for the caution flag to come out. Last time we were here at Michigan, there was only a single caution. It was in the very early goings of the race, and the entire rest of it went green all the way through. A lot of these drivers not 100% sure how exactly to play their cards here. Of course, this isn't like USA International, or I want to say not Southern National because that's not on the schedule this season, but there's a couple of tracks here in ASRC. Oh, driver up into the wall. That's Daniel Sparks hard in the outside wall of the Five Guys entry. But this isn't like USA or one of those other tracks that have managed to find their way onto the schedule time and time again, pretty much every single every single season here in the ASRC Oval Series. These drivers do not have a lot of experience at this track here in this league, and of course this is the only second season, of using this ARCA car. Right now everyone using the high side, which is very interesting to see because we actually got some words with Garrett Hess coming into tonight's event, who is saying that he wasn't really excited for this track because he prefers highline racetracks and he doesn't think that the highline is really going to come in here this evening. But sure enough, going through the corners, we see drivers generally keeping up at least to the middle of the track, if not near the top. A little bit further up here, looking at the battle for 6th on back through 8s here. Michael Sparks leading the way in front of Garrett Streets and Derek Murphy. Corey Logan getting into this battle as well up in the CZ Robotics 24. No one's really able to get away from each other here. Garrett Streets way up onto the high side of the track, nearly scraping the outside wall on corner entry. But it's not quite going to be enough to get the run on that 42 of Michael Sparks. Now he's going to try peeking it down to the low side this time around, and it looks like that is going to work for him, going down into turns 3 and 4. Of course, Michigan, one of those D-shaped ovals, so not quite symmetrical from the front stretch to the back stretch. Also a little bit more banking on the front stretch compared to the back stretch, so you gotta handle your exits pretty differently here on each end of the speedway. Corey Logan way down to the bottom, down onto the apron. That's a little bit scary to see here, but keeps it pointed in the right direction. No harm, no foul so far here in tonight's event. But Mike Young down 3 positions back in that 44. Jason Gardner back 6 right now, running back in the 9th position, just with Daniel Sparks right behind, so there might have been a little bit of contact there for Gardner and Mike Young, or something to make the two of them check up, because they're both down a substantial amount of positions here. And of course, we now find our championship leader, that 00, Garrett Hess, pulling away from the field with a 1.2 second gap right now. Brandon Feeney running back in second at the front of this battle pretty much. He is leading the pack here as Hess manages to pull away just behind Nico Morelli. Looking down to the inside in that number 14 machine. That's the Dirty Mo Radio number 14. Coming in tonight's event, Nico Morelli is 20th in the championship standings. Only able to attend one race here this season. Unfortunately, didn't quite have the night he was looking for, but here he is tonight battling it out for a podium position in the early goings here at Michigan. Garrett Streets also up here in this battle. Both Streets and Morelli currently up +5 from where they qualified here. All 3 trying different lines through the corner. Morelli's down on the bottom. He's going to try and make a run here on Feeney. Feeney's going to drift up a little bit to try and hold off the run from the high line. And I'll tell you what, it looks like for a track that looks like it's about 7 cars wide, you can really make any part of it work for you. Of course, the big question is, once we get, 150 miles of rubber put down on this track, will we see the line start to get narrower, maybe shift around a little bit here? But right now, this whole track is looking pretty darn racy here this evening. Plus, the battle on the speedway is actually going to be the battle at the tail end of the field here between Mike Young, Jason Gardner, and Daniel Sparks for 8th on back through 10th. These 3 drivers are starting to lose the draft here, 1.3 seconds back from Gardner to Murphy. They're pretty much already outside of drafting range, and they're not doing each other any favors here by battling it out for the 8th position. If this race goes green, these 3 drivers are going to need to work together to catch back up to that lead pack, or they could be in for a very difficult evening here tonight. A little bit of damage on the front of Daniel Sparks' number 4 entry. I know he scraped against the wall earlier. I did not realize it was that bad on that 5 guys entry. A track that's so aerodynamically intensive like this one, that could definitely be hurting him in the long run here. Last time by was a little bit faster than Jason Gardner. Of course, he is running back in the draft of that number 93 machine in the 5 guys entry there. But we'll just have to see how he manages to run with that 4 machine. I mean, obviously it's not anything too severe, but every little bit counts here this evening. Of course, 11 laps in the book, still a long way left to go here tonight. Still a bit of a pack up here for second on back through, call it about through 6th here. All single file right now on the speedway for streets on back to Logan. All these drivers are completely falling away from that 00. Garrett Hess, though, he has pulled it up to a 1.6 second lead now and climbing still. Coming into tonight's event, Hess also said that he is feeling pretty under the weather here this evening, so that he is going to be taking it easy here in tonight's event. And I'll tell you what, taking it easy or not, he is absolutely pulling away from the field here in the early goings of tonight's event. 13 laps in the books here at Michigan, still a long way left to go, and presumably multiple pit stops on the table for all of these drivers. I'll definitely be curious to see if anyone tries the one-stop strategy and if it works, because there's just a lot of question marks here on if that will actually play out for these drivers. Morelli starting to close in on Feeney here. Feeney down a spot from where he qualified. Of course, Garrett Streets up +6. Morelli thinking about trying to make the move on that 38, make himself be up +6 as well here. Sure enough, he's going to pull it on down low, try and make the move stick. Both cars drifting a little bit through the corner. And it's still neck and neck coming out of turn number 2. And now Michael Sparks getting involved in this battle as well. He wants a piece of this action, potentially an opportunity to put himself up into the podium. Of course, there are a whole lot of bonus points up here for grabs in the ASRC Oval Series. Being just on the podium ain't quite enough to do it, but leading some laps definitely is. And track position is going to be a big deal when these green flag pit stops start to come underway. If we see Garrett Hess pit before the rest of the field, then all of these drivers for second on back through, called about 7th now, as this pack is closed up just a little bit, are all going to be duking it up to try and pick up those bonus points for leading a lap when the opportunity arises. Even if they can't get around Hess on pure speed right now, that will be their opportunity to get some extra score to their name here this evening. Of course, only 5 races left after this one. We are past the halfway point here this season, even if we are running a bit of a shorter season here in season number 13. First time the ASRC Oval Series has not been 12 races in length, which of course is the standard season length here on the iRacing.com platform, but had a race fall on Christmas. And Brandon Feeney out into the outside wall. That is not great to see. There is right front damage on that number 38 machine. That's going to send him all the way back to 7th. All the way back now, finding himself going to be getting involved with the pack with Young, Gardner, and Sparks here in a minute, though it looks like Sparks has fallen away in that number 4 machine. Side by side up here with the other Sparks, though. Michael battling it out with Nico Morelli for the 3rd position, as they are starting to fall away from Garrett Streets as well. All of this battling is breaking the draft, and that is not doing any of these drivers any favors to try and catch up to our race leader, who is now at a 2.6 second lead over the rest of the field. Last time by, it was a 41.26 for Garrett Hess, who was all by his lonesome right now. The next fastest driver was actually Corey Logan with a 41.29, and that was in the draft of 2 other cars. So Hess has figured something out about how to be fast around this speedway. The gap to Streets is starting to close here a little bit as we see these 3 drivers start to work together a little bit, actually draft off each other and not try and go for a pass every single time the opportunity arises. Of course, a famous race car driver once said something along the lines of, "If gap, car." But here in super speedway racing, not necessarily the best strategy. You got to work together. You got to have friends out there in the field. And of course, Garrett Hess now up to a 3.1 second lead here over the field. and it looks like nobody is going to be catching him anytime soon. This is going to come down to pit strategy or maybe a well-timed caution for these drivers to get back up to our current championship leader. Garrett has 3 wins to his name so far this season. Took home wins at Daytona, Dover, and Iowa. Of course, Daytona is the big one here because Daytona is the closest track on the speedway to where we're at right now here at Michigan. Daytona is a little bit bigger, but still this same style of super speedway racing, and we saw Hess put on a very dominant show back at Daytona as well. Brian Sabelski is the second driver in the championship standings right now, and unfortunately he's unable to attend here this evening, has some other obligations, and of course he actually said that when we interviewed him after his win last week at the IR Lucas Oil Indianapolis Raceway Park. He said he would not be able to run tonight. Big question mark if we'll see him next week at the Milwaukee Mile. But Sabelski is currently second in the championship standings. Took home wins at Charlotte and of course last week at IRP. And then Jonathan Cofield, the only other driver that has taken home a win so far in season number 13. Cofield also not out here on the speedway. It has been a little bit of time since we've seen Cofield be able to come out. Only 53 points to his name, 8th in the championship standings right now, just from how the cards have fallen. Of course, here in a couple of weeks, we will start to see these drop weeks get calculated into the point standings, and that should really shake things up with how everyone's running. Once we get into the closing chapters of this season, everyone's 3 worst races will be deleted from the scorecard. Normally it would be 4 here in the ASRC Oval Series, but of course with the shortened season here this season, we're also shortening the amount of drop weeks these drivers have to play with. Battling 2x2 here on the speedway. Morelli's going to put on the parachute a little bit, filter back in behind Streets, but it was 2x2 here in this battle for second on back. Everyone under a blanket here pretty much. And it looks like Derek Murphy is also starting to get involved in this battle. Get a little bit of a top-down view, and we see some drivers trying to ride the wall and keep it as high up as they can. Everyone else trying to follow in the draft of the leader of this pack, none other than the 14 of Mr. Nico Morelli here, as these 5 cars duke it out for track position for when it comes down to green flag pit stops. And again, even in a draft train, these drivers are not managing to catch up to Garrett Hess. I don't know what that 00 machine is doing, but he is doing it real darn well here this evening. 2x2 once again for this battle. Corey Logan, Michael Sparks side by side. Garrett Streets, Derek Murphy also duking it out side by side. And I'll tell you what, a driver that's really happy to see this battling going on is Mike Young. As long as these drivers keep duking it out here in these fisticuffs, we could see Mike Young potentially catch back up to the pack, but that's a very big what if. You can see him back there probably about 10 car lengths back. That is not going to be an easy gap to close no matter which way you cut it. Nearly a little bit of contact there between Streets and the number 42. That's Michael Sparks. A little bit of a run off the corner, tried to make the best of it. Not quite able to make anything stick there though. 25 laps in the books though, going to be quarter of the way through tonight's event once we cross the line next time by. And I'll tell you what, for such a big track, these drivers are still clicking away at these laps pretty dang quick, and it has been a very clean race all around as well. Traditionally, we think of super speedway racing being a little bit of a disaster. Of course, only 10 cars out here on the speedway compared to the approximately 40 to 42 you see at these tracks in the NASCAR Cup Series. But so far, everyone's been very clean, very patient with each other. A couple of scrapes against the outside wall, a little bit of oopsies, but nothing all too substantial so far this evening. Garrett Hess right now, I'd imagine he's very happy with that. He does not want the yellow flag to fly and bunch this field back up together. Corey Logan now finding themselves up into the podium here, running up in the second position, scraping against the outside wall. As soon as I say that, I'm sorry, Corey, I shouldn't have said anything. We're going to blame a little bit of the commentator's curse here on that one as Logan finds themselves falling back to the 6th position. And now Mike Young has closed the gap from 1.6 seconds to about 0.8 seconds, which is great to see. So we could see Mike Young and Jason Gardner, who are working together, unlike the 4 drivers in this main pack, actually close the distance, get back into drafting range, and get involved in this battle for the podium. Mike Young's closed it down to probably about 5 or 6 car lengths from the 10 plus it was at just a moment ago. And as we see these 5 drivers from 2nd on back to 6th putting their cars all over the place, vying for any inch of turf they can get themselves on. Sure enough, Mike Young has closed the gap even further down to 0.5 of a second. They are within drafting range at this point, and we're going to see this turn into a 7 car battle. Corey Logan falling back just a little bit there. That damage on the right front might be a little bit more severe than we realized on that 24. Because Logan's fallen all the way back to behind Young and Gardner here. Looks like in the draft of Gardner, they're doing A-okay in that 24 machine, though, but that was a lot of ground loss. So unless there was another scrape against the wall there that we might have missed, Logan losing a little bit of ground here in these last couple laps. But sure enough, Mike Young has caught back up to this pack. And soon we could see Mike Young and Jason Gardner down -2 and -4 respectively from where they qualified here right now, potentially vying for the lead of this battle. Garrett Street's starting to fall back a little bit himself here in that number 15 machine, call it about 7/10 of a second back from these 3 main drivers. It looks like Street's maybe having a little bit of tire fall off here. Could be potentially what we are seeing going on with that number 15. Are we going to be pushing it 3 wide here at Michigan? Sure enough, yes, we are 3 wide here this evening. Mike Young's going to back out of it here a little bit, fall in behind that number 93 machine. Don't want to do anything too risky when there's still 70 laps left to go here in tonight's event, as we see Garrett Street scraping against the outside wall here just a little bit. But sure enough, Jason Gardner, Derek Murphy, Mike Young, all back in the thick of things here. Nico Morelli continues to lead this battle as they are now 7 seconds back from Garrett Hess. Daniel Sparks going to be pulling it on down to pit lane here. He was about 5 seconds behind the rest of the field. At that rate, you might as well pit early, maybe try and come out of pit lane in a place where you can get the draft and at least stay where you are a lap down and not get further lapped. Sure enough, as the field soars on by, that will be bumping Daniel Sparks a lap down here. I can't help but wonder, is this a scheduled stop? But it is a little bit early here, even for a 2-stop strategy, I think. And sure enough, no, it looks like Daniel Sparks has packed the car up and sent it down to the hauler. So that is going to be Daniel Sparks' evening wrapped up here tonight. He's going to be bringing it home back in position number 10. Currently going back down to this just absolutely chaotic mid-pack battle here. Derek Murphy, Mike Young, Garrett Streets, Jason Gardner, Michael Sparks. Everyone is throwing everything they've got at each other like we're not only a third of the way into tonight's event. Take a moment, let's ride on board here with one of these ASRC Oval Series drivers, see what all they are seeing out here on the speedway as they vie for position here, about a third of the way through tonight's event. Nothing like a little bit of three-wide battling here at the Michigan International Raceway. Drivers starting to duck down to the pits and make their first set of green flag pit stops down here. Jason Gardner already came bit down a couple laps before, along with Garrett Streets and Corey Logan. Now I see Michael Sparks and Derek Murphy making their stops here. And I would imagine it's going to be 4 tires and fuel if I had to guess. Sure enough, that is going to be the call for both of these drivers. Still a couple of drivers out here on the speedway, though. Garrett Hess making his way around, now leading the field by 11 seconds. Just no big deal. Nico Morelli going to be the next driver to make his stop. Brandon Feeney still staying out. Mike Young still out. And, of course, our race leader of Garrett Hess still out here as well. And it's starting to feel like maybe some of these drivers aren't going to be picking up the bonus points for laps led off of pit strategy after all, depending on how far Hess pulls the lead forward. If not, it would be going to Mike Young right now, who has got a comfortable 10-second lead over Brandon Feeney. The rest of the field looking pretty spread out as well. And that was something that I thought was really interesting to see, is that all these drivers are pitting at different laps than each other. There's not really any, I guess strategy is the word I'm looking for. No one's pitting together so that they can draft together when they come out of pits. Right now, the only battle on the speedway right now is between Jason Gardner and Garrett Streets for 4th and 5th respectively. These two drivers about 0.3 of a second from each other, but otherwise everyone else on the speedway is completely spread out from each other under these pit cycles. Of course, normally when you see the speedway racing up in like NASCAR, you see drivers generally tend to work together by their manufacturer here, and here in ARCA, there's not really any manufacturer here to be going with. Of course, in real life there is, but here on iRacing, the only ARCA car is the Chevrolet. Of course, everyone's running their own brandings and graphics here on these cars. Of course, Jason Gardner down there in a Toyota Camry. Up here, Mr. Garrett Streets running a Pontiac. So it kind of goes wherever here, but still every single driver, with the exception of one or two, basically pitting on alternate laps from each other. Nico Morelli having a longer stop than he was looking for, though. 1.2, or no, excuse me, a minute 25 down on pit lane compared to the rest of the drivers being on pit lane for about 44 to 45 seconds. And the actual time in the pit box is where all of that came from. 55 seconds work was done to that number 14 machine compared to about 14 seconds for everyone else in the field so far. So it looks like they had to do something under the hood for that 14 machine of Nico Morelli, and that is going to be what's bumping him down 2 laps now. Really solid run here in the early goings of things, but that is going to be a very difficult deficit for Morelli to make up. That said, Morelli just set the new fastest lap of the race, a 39.88, the first driver to go below 40 seconds this entire event with or without draft, and he did it without any help. So whatever they did to that 14 machine, he has got some serious speed underneath him now. But will it be enough for him to get back on the lead lap here and actually capitalize on it in the latter half of this race? As he crosses the line, that time by only a thousandth of a second slower than that personal best, or overall best lap, excuse me, that he set last time around. So definitely a lot of speed that we need to keep an eye on as he scrapes into the outside wall. Maybe a little bit more speed than he was accounting for here. Once the camera cycles around, doesn't look like he has any bodywork damage on the 14, so no harm, no foul there. Not really a big deal. We do finally see our race leader come down pit lane, though. That 00 Everfrost Winter Rider entry of Garrett Hess, driver out of Mechanicsville, Maryland, and our current championship points leader by 49 points. I'd imagine we're going to see the same strategy out of that 00, right? It's going to be 4 tires and fuel. You got to assume. But of course, speaking of manufacturers here, Garrett Hess driving for Dodge. So really, at this rate, I'm starting to think every single driver in this field is just driving for a different manufacturer at this rate. Garrett Hess gets back out on the speedway. Not the fastest stop we've seen, but still in a respectable margin, 14.58 for Garrett Hess as he comes back out on the track. And now we will have Mike Young at least picking up 1 bonus point for leading a lap here this evening. First lap led, not by Garrett Hess, and it's going to go to the 44 Mountain Dew Code Red entry of Mike Young. Coming into tonight's event, Mike, no wins to his name, but he is 3rd in the championship standings right now, running 20 points back from Brian Sabelski, and of course Sabelski is 49 points back from Garrett Hess. No Sabelski out on the track here this evening, so this is a really good opportunity for Mike Young to close up the points deficit just a little bit. Question is, how will things shake out at the end of this pit cycle? Because of course Young still has to stop eventually, so does Brandon Feeney. We're 46 laps in the books, though. Most of the field pitted in the early 30s. So it looks like Young and Feeney and maybe Garrett Hess don't know 100% what the call is for that 00. But at least for Young and Feeney, it looks like they're both going to be trying for the one-stop strategy here tonight. And we could potentially see that make all the difference if it manages to work out for them. Sure enough, Mike Young's going to be coming on down to pit lane. Got a little bit loose on the entry, but he's keeping it pointed in the right direction, and he's down below pit lane speed, so everything should be a-okay for that number 44. Side by side, a little bit further back, though, Garrett Hess and Jason Gardner duking it out here, but Hess is just absolutely pulling away last time by more than half a second faster than Jason Gardner. Brandon Feeney now going to cycle out to the race lead, so he will be picking up a bonus point for leading a lap here this evening, though not really in the championship at this rate, unfortunately, which is really sad to see because Feeney was the runner-up last season behind Garrett Streets for the championship. And speaking of being right behind, now Garrett Streets is running up in second, 1.8 seconds, and catching on that 38 of Brandon Feeney. Looks like Feeney is really going to try and stay out here until that car is running on fumes, so he can make this strategy work as well as he possibly can. He's going to be keeping it way down to the bottom of the track. He knows there are faster cars coming up behind him. Garrett Streets and Garrett Hess both setting some very fast lap times, but still none of them have managed to break down into the 39-second range like Nico Morelli has. Feeney's going to keep it down low, though, and we're going to see Garrett Streets a new race leader. If he can hold off that 00, he will be picking up a bonus point, but it looks like he's not going to be able to. Garrett Hess pulls it back up to the race lead. Now the question is this going to be where we see Feeney pit? And the answer is yes, it is. Feeney has decided he has saved long enough. Looks like he is going to try and make it with one more stop, or, well, this as his only stop here this evening, excuse me. Little bit of damage to the right side of that 38 machine. I don't even know if he's going to bother having that fixed down here on pit lane. He might just say, do the regular service and let me get back out there. Sure enough, they're going to be putting on the right side tires. Will we see any of that damage get fixed on the 38 machine? Nope, not at all. Just tires and fuel for the 38. He's coming back out on the track, and he wants to get out there as fast as he possibly can so he can try and make this one-stop strategy work. A little bit further out in the field, right behind where Feeney's coming out, that's the 93 of Jason Gardner being tailed closely behind by Michael Sparks. Caught about 0.2 of a second between these two drivers. And it looks like Sparks is gaining maybe a little bit of a tap to the outside wall there down the back straightaway. But Feeney is filtered out in a really solid spot in the middle of the pack, and he's filtered out in front of Morelli, so should a caution flag fly, Feeney will be put back on the lead lap here. Of course, should this race stay green all the way, that would work out really well for Feeney, but if there is a caution that comes out anytime soon, while yes, it will put Feeney back on the lead lap, it might completely throw off the strategy, and suddenly things are going to be looking real bad for him and for Mr. Mike Young. "51 laps in the books, though, so we are officially halfway here at the Michigan International Raceway. 35 minutes so far, all under green flag here for tonight's event. Still, even so far, everyone with the pit cycles has been playing pretty darn nice with each other. Only one driver retired from tonight's event, and of course that is the number 4 of Daniel Sparks. He pulled it on down to pit lane back on lap number 30 and brought it straight back to the hauler. They're packing it up, they're heading home. Fortunate to see Daniel Sparks currently is the last place in the championship standings, as he did finish in last at Daytona, and he didn't pick up any points from that event, so he should be picking up some points here tonight. He has ran enough laps that he will get at least scored, and Bill Watkins isn't present, so that will move him up above Bill Watkins in 21st in the championship standings, but Nico Morelli is still out here and still running, so that will not put him up to 20th over Nico Morelli, but it might possibly put him above Robert Bennett. So a whole lot of question marks all throughout the field in terms of the championship standings, and we're already halfway through the season, and nothing is guaranteed. That much is for certain. It's always a bit of uncertainty here in the ASRC Oval Series on how this championship is going to look at the tail end of each and every race. Battling it out here. Brandon Feeney not on the same lap as the drivers in front of him, so not on the same lap as Garrett Streets or Michael Sparks here. Feeney going to be keeping it up high in that number 38 machine. Not trying to let the field by, though. Normally in short track racing, of course, we see lap cars pull it up high, get out of the way of the race leaders, and just let them go on through. But here, Feeney really needs to stay in front of these drivers as much as he possibly can if he wants this one-stop strategy to work for him here. He needs as much track position as he possibly can, so when the rest of these drivers that all pitted back on lap number 30 come back down pit lane again, he will be able to unlap himself and then ideally maintain the lead over the rest of these cars. That said, these three duking it out here, Streets, Sparks, and Gardner, are exactly what Feeney wants to see, because as long as they keep duking it out, that's going to allow him to pull further and further away here. Speaking of pulling away, Garrett Hess now once again up to an 8-second lead over the rest of the field. I do not know how Garrett Hess is managing to pull away from the rest of the field this hard, because I'm pretty sure that this is a fixed setup race. So everyone's driving identical cars here, but Hess has just apparently found a secret extra gear that none of these other Oval Series drivers know about, because he is absolutely pulling away here tonight. 2x2 here for Sparks and Gardner. Gardner down on the low line, and it's looking like the low line's working for him here. All three drivers falling away from that lapped car of Brandon Feeney as well. And if this race stays green, things are looking pretty good for these drivers here on this one-stop strategy. Of course, we also have to talk about that 44 Mike Young. He's also on the one-stopper strategy here as well, and he is still on the lead lap. So Mike Young might just have a bit of a leg up over Feeney here. Feeney's going to have to really push if he wants to make this work out here tonight. Of course, like we said in the early going of tonight's event, Feeney, this track's only been raced one time prior to tonight's event, and that was in last season, season number 12, and that was one of the races that Feeney won that allowed him to be the runner-up in the championship standings. So I would imagine that Feeney is feeling pretty good about what he's doing here. I don't know how well it's going to work out for him, because it really looks like Mike Young has the cards fallen in his favor here. But still a long way left to go here tonight. Normally 40 laps ain't all that much, but when we're setting 40-second lap times, they're ticking by a little bit slower than we traditionally see here in the ASRC Oval Series. And of course, we can't count out all of the drivers trying the two-stop strategy here tonight. It's not like they've just automatically made the wrong call and that's the end of their event. They still very much could outplay Feeney and Young here tonight. It's really just a lot of depending on track position once we see this next set of pit stops go through for the drivers that actually are going to be making another pit stop. Gonna be 40 to go here when we cross the line. Garrett Hess is leading the field entirely uncontested. He's just going on a nice Sunday cruise right now. He does not have a single darn thing to worry about here this evening. So dropping down to about 162 through the corner, let's take a look and see how that is faring for some of the other drivers in comparison. Street's going down to about the 155 mark at the lowest point of the corner. Taking a look back, let's look back at Nico Morelli, who has set some incredibly fast times and still holds the fastest lap time here this evening. Morelli also keeping up, dropping it down to 159, so not quite able to carry the momentum as much as we see Garrett Hess doing it. I just can't quite figure out what that 00 has figured out to manage to go so fast without the aid of another car at a track that is so draft focused like this one. I honestly, I'm not sure here. Nose to tail here for Sparks and Gardner's. They've been trading positions back and forth for about the last 10 laps at this rate. It looks like neither driver is really going to be giving it up very easily here, especially because both of them are catching up to Feeney in that 38 machine, which is exactly what Feeney does not want to be happening right now. But sure enough, Gardner and Sparks are looking like they're both might end up clearing that 38 machine here in the next couple of laps, provided they don't keep battling it out with each other like this. Gardner comes up, manages to close the door on Sparks and walk away with the second position for the time being. A little bit further back, also nose to tail for Garrett Streets and Derek Murphy, who are about 1.5 seconds back from that battle between Gardner and Sparks. Murphy been running pretty comfortably up inside the top 5 for most of this evening here tonight in that unsponsored number 78. Coming into tonight's event, Murphy is 5th in the championship standings, 78 points to his name, currently tied with the very same driver he's battling with out on the track right now, Mr. Garrett Streets, both tied for 5th, both 7 points back from Jason Gardner. So now the big question here is, do these two battle it out so they can break the tie in their respective spot in the points championship, or do they work together to catch up to that 93 of Jason Gardner so they both can potentially get around him in the championship standings heading into the Milwaukee Mile next week? Right now, as Street starts to fall away, it's looking like they're going to be a little bit more diplomatic with each other, but it also seems like Streets is starting to lose the draft here. His tires might have fallen off a little bit here. Last time by 0.2 of a second slower than Murphy and Sparks. And 0.5 of a second slower than Gardner. Gardner actually set a comparable lap time to Garrett Hess last time by. That said, that doesn't seem to be stopping the fact that Hess has pulled away to a 12-second lead, and it is still climbing here as we cross the line for lap 67. Now 2/3 of the way through tonight's event, and I'd imagine here in the next probably 5 or so laps, we're going to start to see these two stoppers come back down pit lane for their second and ideally final stop of the evening. So of course the drivers we got to keep our eye on with that: Gardner, Sparks, Murphy, Streets, Logan, and Morelli, all looking like they're two stopping here tonight. Garrett Hess kind of up in the air. He pitted on lap 43, and that's a bit of an uncomfortable gray zone for me to call it one way or another on if he's one stopping or two stopping. Speaking of drivers stopping though, Garrett Street's coming down pit lane. Mike Young is also coming down pit lane, which is really bizarre to see because I was sure that Mike Young was going to try to one stop it here tonight, but he's not. He's going for the two stopper. So if I'm correct here, that's leaving just Brandon Feeney as the one driver trying the one-stop strategy. And you gotta think here, Brandon Feeney won this race last season, I believe, doing the same strategy. So Feeney could be on to something here to try and make it 2 for 2 here at Michigan, just from being on an alternate strategy. Troy Logan also making their stop, so that's going to leave just Gardner, Sparks, and Murphy that still need to come down, and maybe Hess, maybe not. I still am undecided on if I think Hess is trying to one-stop or two-stop in the double zero machine, because 43, he pitted right in between the drivers that were one-stopping and two-stopping. Jason Gardner's going to spin it around on pit lane, though. Jason Gardner around on pit lane, and that right there might just be the end of his evening, race fans. Damage to the left front. Potentially a pit lane safety violation. What a disaster for Jason Gardner here this evening. Race leader Garrett Hess is making the call to come down pit lane, though, so that leaves just Brandon Feeney, the one driver still committed to making a one-stop strategy here tonight. And I'm really surprised to see that nobody is going with the strategy of last season's winner at this race. As everyone comes down and makes their stop, so let's take a quick replay to look at that spin for Jason Gardner here as he comes on down into pit lane. That is not quite where we're looking here. Got to go a little bit further back to get what we're looking for. There we go. Taking another look back at this pit entry for Jason Gardner. Wiggles it just a little bit too hot on the brakes, trying to get it slowed down into pit lane here. And just like that, our one and only incident so far here in tonight's event. Of course, no caution going to fly for that, as it wasn't on the racing surface. But man, what a disaster for Jason Gardner. That's going to filter him all the way back to the 6th position. Surprisingly, he is still on the lead lap. He did not get any of that damage repaired by his crew once he got down to his pit box. He just did his regular service and said that's good enough. Brandon Feeney now running up here in 5th, and he is still staying out on the one-stop strategy. But the question is, how are those tires going to hold up compared to Hess and Streets and Sparks, who are all on new tires here? I don't know. As much as it would be kind of funny if Feeney did the same hat trick on the field twice in a row, I don't know if Feeney has the track position to make this work out at this rate. Currently running 17 seconds back from our race leader and falling. I don't know if it's going to work out for that 38 here tonight or not. We'll have to see. Stranger things have happened. Things are looking very good for that double zero of Garrett Hess. I'll tell you what, another driver having a heck of a run here. Garrett Streets back in 2nd in that 15 machine, up +6 right now. Currently biggest mover here in the Speedway. Running in that SM Racing Products Pontiac. Of course, SM Racing Products, the title sponsor here for the ASRC Oval Series. This is their 3rd season running with the league. SM Racing Products for Streets and the other half of the team, Jeremy Morrow, fortunately unable to make it out here this evening. Two drivers, two friends, both out of Topeka, Kansas. A couple seasons ago, they decided, you know what, we want to buy some sim racing gear. Decided there wasn't anything on the market that was quite what they were looking for, so they decided, you know what, might as well just build it ourselves. And that is exactly what those two drivers did, and now they've put together their own business, SM Racing Products, on Facebook, Instagram, pretty much all your social medias out there. Putting together button boxes and a couple of other pretty nifty things, so definitely be sure to give these folks a look and see what they're all about here. Currently running up in the podium here at Michigan, so far they're having a pretty solid time here this evening. Garrett Hess leading the field by 11.9 seconds. The gap is starting to close a little bit. Not by an amount that I think is going to be meaningful, as we get a call from the flagman of 25 laps left to go. At 12 seconds, it's going to be incredibly difficult to make up, even if Streets is starting to, or if Hess is starting to slow down, and it looked like he is last time, by a 40.66 for Garrett Hess, a 40.5 for Garrett Streets, a 40.35 for Michael Sparks. Nico Morelli at the tail end of the field, losing a spot to Mike Young. Morelli is being the little engine that could here tonight. After such a solid run in the early goings of this thing, just didn't have the pit stop he was looking for. 55 seconds down in his pit box compared to everyone else, about 15 seconds. Even Jason, who had that spin on pit entry just a couple laps ago, only lost 10 seconds down on pit lane compared to the roughly about 40 that Morelli lost. Morelli currently running back in the 9th position. He is back on the lead lap though. And of course there is the all-looming threat of a caution flag coming out. If the yellow flag flies, I think a lot of these drivers are going to have their strategies turn upside down on their heads, and it's just going to be an absolute mad dash in these final 23 laps. I see Nico Morelli's back on the lead lap though, maybe not quite for long. There's the 00 of Garrett Hess, and Hess is closing that gap mighty darn quickly here. Sure enough, Morelli's just going to pull it on up high and let him by. That's going to put Morelli back down a lap. But of course, if the caution flag comes out, that will be giving him a spot back here this evening. Plenty of what-ifs left here on the speedway, but right now everyone else is very spread out. The closest battle on the speedway is between Michael Sparks and Garrett Streets, and that's about a 6/10 of a second gap between these two drivers. Everyone else has at least 2.5 seconds between each other. More like 5 or 6 is roughly where it's at around the field. 22 to go here at the Michigan International Speedway, and what a crazy race it has been so far. Of course, gotta give a big thank you to everyone tuning in here this evening for supporting the channel, supporting the league, and allowing us all to put on these races for y'all to tune into every Monday night. Of course, next week, heading on out to the Milwaukee Mile. That is going to be a pretty spicy race. Of course, Milwaukee is a lot like New Hampshire, pretty much completely flat all the way around. And that is going to really test some of these drivers' ability to conserve their tires, some of their abilities to be patient with each other. For those of you who tuned into last week's race at the Lucas Oil Indianapolis Raceway Park, Milwaukee Mile is very similar to IRP, but with an extra quarter mile of length. But of course, for now, super speedway racing is what it's at here this evening. As we see, Nico Morelli had to make another pit stop. He's back out on pit lane, or back out on the speedway, now being scored 2 laps down. Looking at the schedule for the remainder of the ASRC Oval Series, though, of course, only a few races left after this one. Next week, like we said, the Milwaukee Mile for 100 laps. Then we're heading over to the Watkins Glen Raceway for 41 laps. That is about roughly 100 miles around Watkins Glen. for a little bit of road course action. Of course, they did do some road course racing last season at Tsukuba, and Garrett Hess took home the win at that track as well. So definitely a driver to have to keep an eye on during our next road course race. And of course, after Watkins Glen, gonna be sending it over to the fastest half mile on the planet, none other than the last great Coliseum of Bristol Motor Speedway. Then on March 4th, going to be kicking it off the championship at Kansas Speedway for another full-length ARCA event, and that is where we will be crowning our champion here in about a month from now, roughly. Tell you what, though, what a jam-packed schedule we have. Got a little bit of a smaller track, then a road course, then a super tiny short track, and ending it off on an intermediate speedway. That's going to be quite the challenge for these drivers to be consistent through all 4 rounds. Of course, it is the asphalt Bristol, not the dirt Bristol. I do have to mention that one because these ARCA cars do actually race on dirt on occasion here in the real world, but it's gonna be all asphalt here for the ASRC Oval Series. Still looking at the closest battle on the speedway here between Michael Sparks and Garrett Streets, duking it out for the 2nd position here in tonight's event. Still 12 seconds back from Garrett Hess. They're not going to close that gap without a yellow flag, I don't think, unless something just goes catastrophically wrong for that 0-0 here in these next couple of laps. I don't think it's going to happen. Of course, tires will always be fading away through the remainder of this race. We might see this drivers start to slip, start to slide, start to be all over the place. We could potentially have a spin come from that. But you never know, anything is possible, and I say that as we hear Garrett Street scrape against the outside wall. I'm not trying to wish any bad omens here on these drivers, but it is a little bit weird that I start talking about what might happen if a caution flag flies and we start seeing drivers starting to make mistakes. Speaking of drivers making mistakes, though, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Brandon Feeney damage to the right front in that 38 machine, now being scored a lap down. I don't think the one-stop strategy is going to work out for that 38 machine, not this time here at Michigan. Of course, he pitted back on lap number 48, so we might have to see this driver actually have to start saving fuel just to make it across the start-finish line. Depends on how hard he's been pushing here in these final couple of laps. But at least as it stands, as long as he stays where he is, he won't be passed by Nico Morelli. $14 laps left to go here at Michigan before we crown ourselves a winner, and so far, it's looking as if Garrett Hess might take home win number 4. Last season, Hess wasn't even in the top 5 in the championship standings, but managed to end off the season with the most wins of any driver. But of course, he was only running part-time back in season number 12. So far, full-time for that 0-0 of Garrett Hess, which is great to see because I don't believe he has ran a full season uninterrupted since, I want to say, season number 1. Maybe season 2. But still, otherwise, Hess has generally been part-time here in the league, so definitely great to see him running out here full-time once again in that purple and white Everfrost entry. We see Hess starting to come up on a lap car. That's the 44 of Mike Young, which again, just a complete shocker to see because Mike Young was absolutely throwing it in there and battling it out for the front of this field in the early goings of tonight's event. But that just goes to show, when you have a full hour now of green flag racing, it's not about who can get to the front the fastest, it's about who can stay consistent for the longest. And Hess has been really consistent all throughout these past 89 laps. Starting to come up on some lap traffic here, though. Of course, that's not really going to slow him down at all. He's got a 13.8 second lead over Michael Sparks and Garrett Streets. Even if there was a little bit of a mishap here, it's entirely possible he'd be able to get it around and get it back going again before the rest of the field caught it up to him. And of course, on top of that, this track is approximately 7 cars wide, so plenty of room to get around that lap car without really any sort of concern here. Mike Young pulling it down to the bottom, pretty much still running his line. Hess is not quite close enough to try and actually overtake this car. We do have the double high five from Barney the Flagman, though. 10 to go here at Michigan, and it's all been green flag racing. Hess starting to close in on that number 44 machine. Is he going to let him by? Yes, he is. He's just going to go ahead and pull it up to the top part of the speedway. Let that 00 roll on through. And now we will see Young going to take the lucky dog spot should a caution flag come out, and that is just going to bite Feeney in the butt even harder. Still committed to that one-stop strategy, and we see him spin. Feeney spins coming down onto pit lane. It looks like the one-stop strategy isn't quite going to work out for him. Here with 9 laps left to go, let's take a quick look back and see what happened to Feeney on pit entry there, because that looked a little bit hairy. Looking down here at the driver out of Canada as he makes his second green flag pit stop of the evening, locks up the right front tremendously. Manages to keep it pointed in the right direction, so he didn't spin there at the very least, just not quite the pit entry he was looking for, and that we might see a penalty being given to that 38 for an unsafe pit entry. I don't have the data from race control to know for sure one way or another, but just looking at how he came in around the cone, I would imagine that the iRacing race control is going to assess a unsafe pit entry on that number 38 machine. And sure enough, he's been on pit lane for a full 50 seconds now, and most of these drivers only make 15-second stops, so it looks like that might either be a penalty assessed to the 38 machine, or he's just calling it an evening and wrapping it up here with 7 laps left to go here at Michigan. Everyone on the field right now is outside of drafting range from each other, so there's not a whole lot anyone can do at this rate unless someone decides to lift off the throttle to pick up the car behind him and try and form a little bit of a draft train. But I think everyone is so spread apart at this point that even if they did do that, it wouldn't be worth it, because they wouldn't really be able to catch up to any of these other cars in the field with just 6 laps left to go. Not with them having 8, 14, 16-second gaps between each other. The only drivers that really could use anything right now is Garrett Streets and Derek Murphy, who are almost an even second between each other. But even then, they would not be able to catch up to Michael Sparks here with just 6 to go. Not one little bit. Garrett Hess pulling around another lap car, though. That's the 24 of Corey Logan in the CZ Robotics entry. Coming into tonight's event, Corey Logan's being scored back in the 11th position with 39 points to their name. And just in front of him is TJ Henson by 7 points. And of course, TJ is not here, so Corey Logan may be finding themselves moving up into the top 10 in the championship standings as we get the big high five up in the air. 5 to go here at Michigan. 5 more going to be 4 to go, actually, as we cross the line. So call it about 8 more miles. Call it about 13-ish kilometers, roughly. For those of you who, use metric, we do got plenty of Canadian drivers out here in the field. We're just going to call it 13 kilometers, and who are they to say otherwise? The gap has closed up a little bit here between Murphy and Streets, though. Call it about 0.2 of a second. It looks like Streets' tires are really starting to fall off for him, because Murphy has closed that gap mighty dang quickly. And for once, we see drivers within drafting range of each other. So this is going to be the closest battle on the speedway. Here with 3 laps left to go, battling it out for the final podium position here between Garrett Streets and Derek Murphy. And it looks like Murphy might be able to get it here in the next couple of corners. Streets is definitely losing a bit of ground here. Let's see how it is as we cross the line. Sure enough, Derek Murphy a full 0.2 of a second faster than Garrett Streets. He just does not have the tires to hang on here. I say that Murphy slides a little bit going down into turn 1. Not quite able to clear that 15 machine, but here at Michigan, this track is just too big to try and hold Murphy off, I think. If Murphy can get a run here, he should be able to walk away with a podium position here tonight. 2 laps to go from the flagman, though. Murphy is running out of opportunities to try and make it happen here. He's starting to get a run built up here once again. Will we see him dive it down low here into turns 1 and 2? No, we will not. He's going to try and keep it on the bumper of Streets. Try and get more momentum here down the backstretch so he can try and go for it down into 3 and 4. And I'll tell you what, this might be his last opportunity to do it. White flag up in the air. 1 to go here at Michigan. And Derek Murphy is going to make the pass. And now it all falls down onto Garrett Streets. Will Streets be able to pick up the draft here and try and slingshot himself around? His tires are good enough that he can draft off that number 78. It's going to be a drag race to figure out who finishes off the 3rd spot of the podium. Streets is looking a little bit squirrely here through the corner. He falls back a little bit coming out of 2. Checkered flag up in the air. Streets is not going to have it here. He has lost all the momentum he had on Derek Murphy. So it's going to be Garrett Hess taking home your race win here tonight, followed by Michael Sparks. And then Derek Murphy in that 78 walking away with a podium finish here this evening. 100 laps here at Michigan, all under the green flag. An hour in 10 minutes. Is our race time here tonight. A little bit of a longer one here for the drivers of the ASRC Oval Series, but Garrett Hess is going to get it done, and he is going to be taking home win number 4 here for season 13. Of course, with Sabelski not able to attend, Mike Young finishing back into the 7th position. Jason Gardner finishing back in 5th. This is going to do nothing but build Heth's points lead even further up as we get ready to head into the final 4 races of the season. Also gonna drive through some bushes. I don't know if those bushes are quite in the contract here, so we might have to actually pay for those. I don't know about that one. That's how race fans. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back here in just a second with some words with your top 3 finishers here this evening. Alrighty, race
Yes, sir.
fans, welcome back here to the Michigan International Raceway. 100 laps of green flag racing here in the books here tonight, and Garrett Hess once again getting it done here tonight and taking home win number 4 here for the season. How are you feeling here this evening?
Pretty sick. I caught a cold sometime today, and I've been all sorts of messed up. But in terms of iRacing, I feel pretty good right now.
Fair enough. Maybe you're getting some sort of car driving superpowers out of this disease. I don't know. I don't know how you managed to pull a 12-second lead without a drafting partner. Are you cheating? Is that it? Have you discovered how
Um,
to cheat?
I think a lot of people are trying to run the high line, because like in real life, of course, with these cars, it was viable, but I was running one lane above the bottom, and I would just like any speed running the high line would just be negligible compared to running the bottom line and just conserving your stuff a little bit.
Fair enough. I mean, whatever you did, it certainly seemed to work out for you here tonight. When you heard, or well, if you heard, I guess more that drivers were trying to make a one-stop strategy work here this evening, was there any doubt in your mind that that might have actually been the play to go with?
Um, a little bit, and then we just caught Feeney so quickly that we knew that um, that it wouldn't really be the best idea because you lose so much time by the way of tires. So did did a pretty good strategy. Nearly ran out of fuel at the end, but all is well that ends well.
I reckon so. I mean, that's win number 4 to your name, even with you being sick. And of course, Sabelski not being here, Mike Young finishing back in 7th, and Gardner back in 5th. Pretty much all of your competition right now in the championship standings didn't do very hot here tonight. So you're going to have a big lead heading into the Milwaukee Mile next week. Do you think you're going to take home win number 5 there?
Maybe Milwaukee's a fun track. If Brian or other people show up, then it would definitely be a lot more competitive. But I think I can hold my own at Milwaukee. Sorry, and it'll definitely be a fun race because Milwaukee is one of those tracks that's so unique and it's basically completely flat. So tire saving will be huge there.
Definitely, for sure. For now, though, I'm not going to keep you all night when you're feeling sick. You got a win to celebrate. You have a body to make feel better. So for now, the microphone is all yours, Mr. Hess. Who do you want to thank for getting another win to your name?
I want to thank Team Watson Racing, great group of guys over there. I want to thank Everfrost. Want to thank my brother for giving me something to look forward to every morning. And I want to thank the St. Mary's County Public School Systems for allowing me to do what I love.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out here tonight. Congratulations on the win, and I hope you feel better soon.
Thanks. I'll see you around.
Finishing back in position number 2 in the NVIDIA number 42, Mr. Michael Sparks. That is a name I have not had up here in my broadcast booth here in a little while. How are you doing here tonight?
I'm doing okay. I'm actually surprised that I made it up into the booth because the way it started, the way the race started, I didn't think I had the speed or the tire savings to be able to do it.
Fair enough. I mean, in the early going to this one, it seemed like everyone was kind of all over the place, but you certainly were making it a name for yourself out there. When you came into tonight's race, did you have any particular pit strategy in mind, or were you just going to go with what everyone else around you was planning to do?
No, you were kind of breaking up there. You're asking if I had any particular plan going in.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I originally thought that it might be able to make it a one stopper, and then I realized there's no way I'm going to be able to save 12 laps of fuel. So I was like, okay, just try to divide it up. I just decided let's just pit when everybody else pits and I was hoping for a top 5 with a field of 10. I wanted to finish right in the middle, and just the fact that whatever I was doing, I was picking up speed, and everybody else was dropping off just a little bit more. It was working for me, so I was happy.
Definitely a heck of a run here tonight, and you managed to turn it into a podium. Do you reckon you can take that momentum with you heading into Milwaukee next week?
I'm not sure. I'm not too familiar with the Milwaukee track. I'm not sure if I've run it very often, so definitely going to have to do some research to figure out what I need to do to keep up the top of the podium for that one.
Fair enough. And I mean, looking at the championship standings, it kind of seems to be the same story that Hess had. A lot of the drivers around you either aren't here tonight or didn't have very good runs. So that should bump you up a couple of spots here tonight.
I'm certainly hoping so. And then once the drop weeks start hitting, then it'll hopefully be to my advantage because I've got 2 missed races already. So the numbers don't look great. But I'm
Yes.
just having fun, and that's the whole point. I'm not going for the win of the whole thing. I know I'm not even that caliber. I'm just out here having fun. So to finish up front is good.
Fair enough. That's half the battle sometimes, and it's always great having you out here in the field. For now, though, the microphone is all yours, Mr. Sparks. Who do you want to thank for making everything happen here tonight?
I just want to thank the ASRC guys. I've been racing on and off with them for quite a few years. They're a great group of guys that really help and are encouraging to every us on Monday morning just to see what's going on and what I missed in the race and what other people were doing. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good deal. Thank you for coming out, and congratulations on the podium here tonight. And then finishing back in position number 3, another driver that it feels like it's been a little bit since we've been able to talk to, Mr. Derek Murphy. How you doing here this evening?
Doing pretty good tonight. Had a pretty good race. Managed the tires, I guess, well enough.
I mean, it seemed like everything worked out for you. You seemed to finally break the 7th place curse. You didn't even qualify in 7th here tonight. It basically all worked out for you right from the get-go.
Yeah, I wish maybe I qualified a little better. Had a bad second lap, but could have maybe got me up a little further. Just to get into the pit cycle I wanted to be in, but it worked out well enough. So I don't know. I can't be upset about that.
Fair enough. I guess the same question has to go there too, is how much of a strategy did you really have coming into tonight's event, or were you just playing it by ear?
Up until practice, I wasn't 100% sure where I was gonna pit. Once I did the practice session, I kind of got a long run going and figured around lap 35 would be the case, which ended up being that. Second stint, I should have maybe pit with everybody else, but decided to run a little long and pick up a lap lead point.
Good deal. It certainly seemed to work out for you. And coming into tonight's event, you're 5th in the championship standing, so you're running up there. You did better than Jason Gardner, who's right next to you in the point standings. Sabelski ain't here. You also did better than Mike Young, so I mean it pretty much is looking pretty good for you heading into next week.
Well, it's always good. I have no experience with Milwaukee, so that was a this season purchase. So maybe get some practice in this week and see how it goes.
Seems like a solid strategy to me. I'm really excited to see what all y'all can do over there. For now, though, I'll let you celebrate this podium and start getting some practice ready to go for next week's event. The microphone is all yours, Mr. Murphy. Who you want to thank for making everything happen?
No, just the league. Everything y'all do to get this going every week, and it's just a good group. Everyone, pretty respectful, and it's just a fun league to be in.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out. Congratulations on a podium finish here tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next week at Milwaukee.
Thank you.
You heard it here first, race fans. Your top 3 finishers here this evening here at the Michigan International Raceway. But of course, those aren't the only 3 drivers that came out to tonight's event. So how about we take a look down at how the rest of the standings shook out for tonight's event. Following your top 3 of Garrett Hess, Michael Sparks, Derek Murphy, we also had Garrett Streets running back in position number 4 with Jason Gardner rounding out the top 5 here this evening. 6th place going to go back to Corey Logan in the CZ Robotics 24, followed by Mike Young in 7th. Nico Morelli back in 8th with Brandon Feeney finishing home back in 9th, and Daniel Sparks in the number 4, rounding out the tail end of this 10-car field. That said, that's just about all we've got here from the Michigan International Raceway. 100 laps of green flag racing at a super speedway style track is always quite the spectacle to see. Next week, not quite heading down to a short track, but heading to a speedway that is half the length of this one and with no banking whatsoever to its name. It's going to be none other than the Milwaukee Mile. Thank you all for tuning in here this evening, and I look forward to seeing y'all next week.